So I'm Mary, and I just want to mention very briefly that we're going to try to do a multimedia presentation here. I know that some of you here actually have worked on Measure J and Measure Z, so I really appreciate your help. I think it has started to make some significant changes in our communities in San Benito and Monterey counties. And let's see, while we wait for the audiovisual to come up, did you want to say a few words about Measure J and Z?
Well, first I just want to acknowledge a friend who passed 10 days ago, Rose Brass, who was the co-chair of Californians Against Fracking. She died of brain cancer about 10 days ago. She was also the co-founder of Critical Resistance, where I met her many years ago, working on prison reform issues. And if it weren't for Rose, we wouldn't have gotten the initial support and research that we needed to launch Measure J in San Benito County. We needed to make sure that when we took on the issue of banning fracking, that there was a legal basis for it under California law, so that we would not end up having people invest tremendous amount of efforts against great odds, only to have what passed be wiped out by the courts. And there is strong foundation under California law in terms of it being a home rule state, where cities and counties have broad authority over land use and regulating industrial activities. So, as I said, Rose volunteered in both campaigns, came down from the Bay Area, and we'll certainly miss her.
So we're going to show you two very brief videos. These are, to summarize very quickly the perspective of a filmmaker. One is 3 minutes. This is the first one. I think is Dear Governor Brown. Were you able to find that one?
Yeah, should I just play it?
Oh, sure, yeah. So this is the Measure J campaign in 2014.
The issue of fracking is a great concern to me, because being a grape grower and winemaker, we need water to make our wines. And California, in particular our part of California from here on south, is in the third crisis year of the historic drought. The problem that fracking presents, and has been deadly opposed to it and terrified, is that they use humongous quantities of fresh water, which they then poison and pollute by adding noxious chemicals and neurotoxins. And we're not talking about small quantities of water. A single fracking well can use 1 million gallons of water. And we can't go and just destroy 1 million gallons here, 1 million gallons there, 1 million gallons everywhere. That's what they did that wrecked the groundwater supplies in Pennsylvania and Ohio.
Kern County is mostly where our Latinos are having nosebleed, they're having skin rashes, they're having asthma. The Latinos didn't know what was causing all these side effects, and they said they didn't even know what fracking was, but they're fracking right behind their homes, fracking next to their schools, fracking everywhere, that they don't know their water is being contaminated. When I see children that are getting sick, people who are getting cancer, you say enough is enough. We have to get involved. Governor Brown, listen to our Latino people. Look what is happening in Kern County. Look what we're doing here in San Benito. We're not going to allow this for you to bring all these oil companies and start fracking California.
This is an issue of democracy. Under California law, we do have the right to say no to fracking and other extreme forms of oil and gas, like cyclic steam injection, like acidization. If we can succeed, we're going to export from our county something very important, a contagious hope to other counties. They too can map out their own fate. And the industry, the most powerful industry on earth, cannot afford for us to win. and the rest of the people in this state cannot afford for us to lose.
So that was in 2014. We passed Measure J with help of many people in this room by 59%. And
With the
with 59%. And so I'm going to show very briefly also, I think it's also a 3-minute video. Then we were asked to help. Andy and I live in Aromas, which is divided between San Benito and Monterey County, literally, down the middle of the street. And so we live in San Benito side, but we were asked to help with Monterey in 2015. And so the election was last November. And this is the video about Monterey County's much bigger oil problem. In San Benito County, there were probably like about a dozen active wells, and they wanted to expand the oil drilling near the Pinnacles. So that was why we felt we had to stop it before they expanded. They were proposing 1,000 steam injection wells near the Pinnacles. And then the problem in Monterey is quite different. They have a very old, since the 1940s, drilling. They had 1,500 wells. So the problem was much, much deeper. And so, and it's 7.5 times the population of San Benito. So we were kind of scared when we were asked to help. But we did start doing more and more, and this is a video about that. Monterey County has no real protections. It is one of the few counties in the whole state that has no oil and gas regulations.
Most of the time, gas and oil companies come into communities or come into counties thinking that they can do whatever they want.
We have a very fragile water source right now, and to further endanger it is inconceivable.
The whole future of Monterey, our jobs, our health, our safety, our quality of life is really with efforts. We have heavy agriculture that relies on the groundwater here. We already have 24 injection wells that are illegally injecting into our protected aquifers water that we need for generations to come.
Y pues viene siendo lo mismo del petróleo que se volvió una pipa y se acabó, el estado todo se está muriendo. No hay agua o eso, pues no hay vida.
It's so important that we keep our water clean. We cannot poison ourselves by poisoning the produce.
This initiative is the only recourse that local people have in the county to protect themselves and protect their water and their health and their future.
But having volunteers, talking to our neighbors, talking to our friends, going door to door, that's the only way we can actually spread this direct democracy and people power.
Quiero ayudar a los niños que están en el parque a jugar, no quiero mirar niños enfermos, niños que no pueden salir de sus casas. Y si hacer Anti-Fracking ayuda a mi comunidad, a mis hijos y en un futuro a mis nietos, entonces allí voy a estar yo.
We're a strong community. We come together. We're united. It's basically we have the power in our hands.
The more people we have who own this campaign, even a small piece of it, that's really critical to the future campaign. They'll be involved in educating their friends and family.
We don't want to have fracking in our county. We don't want to see the wastewater being injected into our federally protected aquifers, because that's exactly what they're doing.
Everything is going to come down to if we get this passed. It's going to help protect our neighborhoods for generations to come.
Great. And so Measure Z won. It was a harder fight. We won by 56%. And so I think do now is, one of the things that maybe to move this along is, why is it that we worked on an initiative? Some of you might be wondering. And, when we were starting to tackle the problem in San Benito, we didn't really know very much. And but we did have a mentor who kind of really encouraged us to use democratic tools, because it is very hard to fight an oil industry that's so powerful. So San Benito County gave us a very good kind of local experience, a small scale experience, and I think it helped us in Monterey. But maybe Andy could explain a little bit about the initiative and why we decided to use that tool, because when you're fighting very powerful forces, he'll talk a little bit about why the initiative process came about, and go ahead.
Okay. Well, there was an attempt in San Benito County to try to regulate the oil activities that were beginning to emerge. Oil industry sent thumper trucks out in the Aromas area at a time when fracking was just beginning to boom, and there was a lot of talk about exploiting the Monterey Shale in California. And community members wanted the county to pass strong regulations in San Benito County. As the county started looking at regulations, they invited the oil industry into the process. And the oil industry is far more adept at getting what they want out of negotiations than most community groups are. And so after over a year of negotiations, they ended up with some regulations. Near the end, the oil industry basically said, if we don't get these things in there, we're pulling out of the process, and you'll get no new regulations, and we're going to sue you for anything you put in. And so a lot of times, and this is something from my own experience as a negotiator, a lot of times people mistake how much effort they've put into something for the quality of the product. So you'll often have union leaders telling you, we negotiated this contract for the last 6 months, you should vote for it. Maybe complete crap. And unfortunately, what emerged was not going to do much in protecting the county. And that's when we started looking at the issue of the initiative process. Now, California's initiative process, actually, Santa Cruz is pivotal to the history of the initiative process. Right here, 1910, the Republican convention was held in Santa Cruz. And this is a very different Republican Party in 1910 than the Republican Party. As a matter of fact, probably far more progressive than the Democratic Party is today. And Hiram Johnson, who went on to become governor and the longest serving senator, I believe, realized that we needed major changes in California's law. The state had been dominated by Southern Pacific Railroad, and they were choosing our elected governors, senators, writing our laws. And the Republican Party pushed 3 major changes to California's law. The initiative process, which allowed people to directly enact law. The referendum process, which allowed the people to negate laws passed by the legislature. And the recall, and some of you remember that Gray Davis is one of only 2 governors in the history of the United States ever to be recalled, so that hasn't been used tremendously often. And so we looked at the idea of an initiative. The initiative process has been subverted in a lot of ways by big corporations, but that doesn't mean it has to be subverted. That it has the potential for engaging people. And to give you a sense of what an engaged population can do against powerful forces, in both counties, the oil industry outspent us 18-1. And they had bombarded everybody. You saw some of them in Santa Cruz with television, radio, commercials, print. They had all the resources in the world, infinite amount of money. And yet, the first thing you have to do when you, aside from drafting your initiative, which should involve lots of people in the process because they then know the issues, is you then have to go out and circulate and collect signatures, 10% of the last major election. And that, what a lot of people don't realize, is the beginning of your campaign. In recent years, most initiatives hire people to collect signatures. It's a terrible mistake. Because when you don't hire people, and instead when you put people out on the street as volunteers, they become very, very good at explaining those issues, and they also begin to hear what people think about those issues. They're, far better than any polls could ever do. You find out what issues resonate with people. And so we learned things in collecting signatures in San Benito County. For instance, a lot of assumptions were made about the Latino population. San Benito County is the first majority Latino county in the Greater Bay Area. And there was an assumption that it was an off-year election, there wasn't going to be high participation by Latinos, and that they weren't going to be strongly interested in the issue, which is very, very far from the truth. We found when we collected signatures that the Latino population was far more supportive of controls over big corporations, concerns about health. Literally, you could expect 90% of Latinas to sign the petition, and if their husband was with them, he would sign too. And so we also realized that they were far more likely to come out and vote if they were involved in the conversation. Yeah.
So we're going to be showing some slides about the campaign. Maybe we can move over to the side, or I'll stand up actually. So one of the things that we discovered, when you get into politics, maybe it helped that we were novices, because when you are novices, you don't tend to do the traditional things. And we knew that we had worked on a lot of political campaigns before too, mostly local politics. Even in Santa Cruz, quite a few years ago, we helped get John Laird elected. But so we had pretty strong opinions about what grassroots campaigns are. And what we have observed is that over the last few decades, we were in Santa Cruz last in 1982, 80,
Yeah.
80, no, 80, maybe a little bit
I think we
longer.
moved out in 87.
87, okay. So it's been a long time, but what we've noticed is that the political system has become much more corporate. You usually hire a consultant who's very highly paid. It really helped that we didn't have very much money, so we were forced to try to think of different ways of campaign. But we also knew that that was really not what we wanted. And also our mentor, Art Pearl, who was a former professor at UC Santa Cruz, had really advised us that, democracy is really about empowering people. And the current political system, the campaigns themselves, I think that may explain why we have such bad results in terms of candidates, even initiatives. It's because the process is so undemocratic. It's really run by a few people. They spend tons of money, usually on media, that they have actors, so very professional, slick stuff. We wanted to make it real. So we're going to show a few slides that I just kind of pulled out from our portfolio of pictures from two campaigns, Measure J, 2014, Measure Z, so they might be interspersed. So I try to make it very simple about, why we think our campaigns were more successful. And I try to use examples of really, how we try to engage the population. And as we talked about this, Andy and I, we realized that, we really try to engage people who were artists in the community. So let's go through winning grassroots campaigns. Oh, okay. Challenge. That's okay. So this is just from the Pinnacles. We had an event there. So go to the next slide, please. So I think what we try to do in everything we did, a lot of it was very unplanned. We just moved along and saw what was happening and evolved. We were, I think, generally trying to get voters to think out of the box. So even our signs, we discovered, first of all, we didn't have much money, so we just started painting some signs, but we had to have succinct messages that really kind of shook people up a bit and got their attention. So we just made these big signs, really large signs. It was basically plywood, and we put them around the county. And this is even before we even got the signatures, before we even wrote the initiative, to kind of wake people up. And so we felt that, we needed to get people to think in new and unconventional, think about their world in a different way. So for the next slide, please. So we decided that, you know, grassroots campaigns needs musicians. So we actually had quite a few musicians, and this one guy, Bill Hunter, wrote some songs actually for our campaign. Next slide, please. And then we had Arturo Rosette. He is a professor of art at Gavilan, and so he was very inspired, and so he did a lot of our signs. So a lot of our large signs, you know, instead of having, we had a few printed up, but they were so expensive. He said, I'll just do them for you. So he just made hundreds of them, I think. And they started getting vandalized by people on the other side, so he just kept making more of them and and repainting them. So, and that's Riley, his partner. And we had other artists. This, the one that says Yes on Jay with the newspaper boy, that's actually a high school student who painted that. And so he just kind of appeared one day in our office and started asking about painting some signs. So we said, sure, go for it. And this is another Arturo Rossetti sign. What happened is, you know, in San Bernardino County there's only one big high school, well, there's two high schools. The one in Hollister, their logo is hay balers, and it's a very unusual mascot. And so they decided to create a group called Hay Balers Against Fracking. So the high school students got very active, created a Facebook page, and this is a mural that was created by Arturo. Go ahead, next page. And here's an event that we had, you know, just sign painting. Next one. And this is, you know, even downtown San Benito in Hollister, we had signs. Next slide. The other thing we had is we had two poets, you know, for such a small community. I think we have about 58,000 people in San Benito, the whole county. We had two poets, Gabriel and this is Sam Ramos. Sam usually did his poetry in Spanish, and, you know, they would do their poetry at various events, and they were always about the initiative. Next slide, or about fracking. The other thing that we discovered is really important to a campaign is great chefs. And we were very fortunate in that in our campaign we had some people who were, you know, I think because, I don't know if all of you know, that San Bernardino County is majority Latino, and one of the great things about being a community with so many Latinos is that the food is really great, and people are still very into making lots of food for events and for all the volunteers. And I remember someone telling me 2 important things for grassroots campaigns is have lots of food for your, really good food for your volunteers, and having lots of signs, even small signs. Next slide, please. And so as we kind of evolved this, we realized that in some ways a good grassroots campaign is like organizing lots of different people into a kind of a community performance art project. And the thing that's challenging is how to engage people, to empower them so they can use their creativity in, you know, hopefully nothing that's very destructive. So anyway, one of the challenges in our campaign, you know, we did have a paid campaign consultant. We were required to do that. Some of our people did not feel safe without that. So there's a constant tension between us and the campaign consultants. We try to limit they mostly just created literature, you know, mailers for us. But I remember one time they really interfered in a very destructive way, where one of the previous poets, Gabriel, had created a video of a poem that he had written, and he had lots of us speaking parts of it, reciting parts of it, and the campaign consultant decided it was really inappropriate because it mentioned something about Governor Brown. So he demanded that we take it down, and it created so much strife in our campaign. The wife of Gabriel quit, and she was like the major person in our office. So for 2 months, we didn't have anyone entering the data of, you know, because we were doing canvassing door to door. So one of the things I learned from that is really you have to be very open-minded in a grassroots campaign. It is really difficult to work with volunteers and allow people, giving people the power to go and do things. You know, a lot of times there's disagreements, but, okay. So anyway, so that was one of the things we discovered is the challenges of grassroots campaigns. Next slide, please. And the other one is just being very inclusive. Do you have any last remarks?
Yes. In a lot of ways, I thought about this in terms of, you know, as I said, I've been involved in union organizing. I helped democratize the State Employees Association, which at the time was the single biggest local in the United States, 100,000 members. is that most of our problems in this world are symptoms of a lack of democracy. That when you really look at it and you see where most people are at, they want a different kind of world and different kind of future. And so we've systematically, through every one of our institutions, disempowered them. And my mentor, Art Pearl, who went to his 95th birthday just a few weeks ago, he used to give a lecture called The 4 Mechanisms of Oppression in a Free Society. We don't do the death, squads and the people with this, with the stockings over their head and throwing people in vans very often anymore. We have in the past. We are more subtle, but maybe more pernicious. And so his 4 mechanisms were illusion, confusion, division, and diversion. And for many, many years, I argued with Art because, he comes from the greatest generation, that fought World War II and helped end the Great Depression, and they believed they could remake the world. But something has happened over the decades since then, and I think disillusionment is far more powerful as a mechanism of oppression, the sense that nothing is possible. And so that's why I said it was critical for folks in San Benito County to win, because democracy is a contagion, and the powerful know that. And that's why they worked very hard to suppress victories by regular people, because as regular people feel a sense of power, they realize that these entities are not all powerful, that they can outspend you dramatically and have no traction, like they did in the 2 counties. And the other thing, I think about it is kind of a riff. Maybe it's, maybe a good campaign is and I'm no musician, but you have a kind of a general idea of where you want to go, but you're constantly playing with the things that come into it. And there's certain theory that underlies it. And Art used to talk about 8 motivating conditions, because you're trying to get people to want to be part of something. And so he talked about security, comfort, belongingness, usefulness, meaning, excitement, and hope. Opportunities to be creative. That you organize it so that people feel like what they're doing is more important and more enjoyable than other things they might do. And everybody, when you talk to people in San Benito County and Monterey County who are involved in this campaign, they have a tremendous sense of pride that they did this. And the level of engagement, not that I extol this as a virtue, but at San Benito County there was a brawl in the high school over the fracking issue. That's how engaged those high school students were in the issue. So I think that, if there's a lesson out of all of this, is that we have to figure out how to make people once again feel like, the future is mutable.
Okay, great. I think what we'll do is we're going to stop a little bit just to see if there's any, I know there's a chance for questions later, but maybe if there are any questions now or comments, feel free to, Joe?
Joe.
We're going to talk about the challenge, the legal challenge.
Oh, right, yes.
We're going to interview them on the radio tomorrow, Planet Watch Radio, KSCO.com, listen live at 2 to 3.
So,
all
yeah.
these weekly shows are available on the web, cbsradio.com.
Thanks, Joe, for that plug. So, yeah, there is, just to let you know, the oil industry, just doesn't roll over. They don't, just because we won using the ballot box. In San Benito County, there was a lawsuit. However, because there's not that much oil, the small oil company dropped that lawsuit. We had a legal committee there. And now in Measure Z's case, there are 6 lawsuits. So that's Chevron, Era Energy. Era is owned by Shell, ExxonMobil, and there are some other smaller companies, as well as the royalty owners who own all of the, they're usually multimillionaires who own the mineral rights that they have sued. So our group, Protect Monterey County, has assembled a fantastic legal team. We have a pro bono law firm called Robbins Kaplan. They're major litigating, they're specialists in trial law. We have, it's a Shoot Mahaley Weinberger. They're drafted the initiative. They're land use experts. We also have Stanford Environmental Law Clinic, and their attorneys there. We have also the attorneys from Center for Biological Diversity. And so we have a great team, but the thing is, we do have, it's mostly pro bono. We have some expenses, so we are doing some fundraising. We could talk to you about that later. But in other words, oil industry is not going to give up. So this is now going to become a legal battle. But we do have still the role, in our case, of educating the public, because what they're doing is, you know, they're just bullies. They've been this way all throughout. So now what they're doing is blaming those of us who did the initiative for causing, for creating a financial burden for the county. And the county is actually, you know, kind of blaming us to some extent. And we saw the same thing happen in San Benito, although that was resolved. Our group, you know, has raised money, and we're helping the county. So we think we can actually save the county a lot of money. In San Benito County, our group, San Benito Rising, we paid $13,000 in legal fees before the lawsuit was dropped. The county paid only $684. So it really was not as scary. The oil industry threatened to bankrupt San Benito County, but it didn't happen. Now, Monterey County is a little different. It is a bigger oil industry, and we think that we can still win. But the thing is, all of us have to still hold the hands, reassure the supervisors, and also educate the population to say, no, you know, we have the right to stand up to the oil industry. This is not our fault, you know, that we're being sued. So anyway, so any other comments or questions? Yes, go ahead.
I've recently heard, I'm not sure if you have, that they're also starting some fracking in South San Jose. Are you guys aware of that?
There's a oil field, a Sargent oil field, actually down south of Gilroy, that's been in, as far as I know, that's the only oil production going on in the county.
Yeah, it's not fracking, it's conventional, although they are probably doing steam injection. You know, the word fracking, we can talk about this later, is, you know, it's defined by the oil industry as hydraulic fracturing, but I think it should be broader, because steam injection is, I think, pretty damaging, and so is acidizing. And the activity of fracking, you know, if you look at it historically, it came from Battlestar Galactica in the 1980s, I believe. So it was used as the F word, and what they're doing to our environment is pretty much, you know.
I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, let's stop. So let's give someone else a chance.
Let's get Dr. Lopez in.